We're finally back after a long hiatus. I want to thank everybody for joining us again on this newest edition of the ThunderCast. You got me, your host, Thomas Guerra, a.k.a. Lyle Convoy, and we have my good man, Tyler, the T-Rex Baker. How you doing, Dave, Tyler?
Doing just fine, man. Ready to get my claws dirty here and dig back into the Thundercat mythology and lore.
Awesome. Sorry for the major delay between episodes. Life's been pretty hectic. That's all on me. So for those of you wondering, that's all my fault. Just be aware of that. Unfortunately, we do not have Mr. Joe the Legend Omato with us because he is ill. So keep him in your prayers or however you feel to deal with that. And I'm sure he'll be back with us next time if everything goes right. Today, though, we are going to be discussing some very interesting topics. Mr. Tyler, do you want to tell everybody what we're discussing today?
Well, I'm not sure which order you wanted to do this in, so I'm just going to assume, since you dish it to me, that we're going to be discussing the infamous saber-tooth Grune the Destroyer.
All right. You are absolutely correct. We're going to start today off with a character discussion about Grune the Destroyer from the original series. Then we're going to segue into a short discussion about the third episode, Berbils, of the original ThunderCats, and close out with the second part of the Heroes and Villains ThunderCat Origins from Wildstorm, the comic book line, which is a actually fairly decent read, believe it or not. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into this and talk about Grune the Destroyer. Tyler, what are your thoughts about this character in general?
Breaking it down, he's in a, I mean, immediately, first thing comes to mind is he is arguably my favorite villain next to Rotaro. I found him to always be quite an imposing character. However, the character's never written with any kind of it's almost like it's missing a lot of logic. Like I've never been too all right with the idea of this character being a ghost, so to speak, simply because the action figure, it's not presented as a ghost character. It's just I would love to ask Leonard Star what he was thinking when introducing this character, which I like the backstory. Unfortunately, it just kind of doesn't leave a whole lot of room for this character to return. And even when he does, I look at this character and I want this to be someone who is a formidable foe for Lion-O and the ThunderCats. And when you watch the Ghost Warrior, the character is kind of written all over the place, given a great beginning with being trapped in the tomb and unleashed by the Balkans by accident. I mean, that whole opening sequence, I mean, that deserves a commentary like around Halloween for that episode. But it just goes from like all over the place that he's a ghost that can suddenly become a giant and be a physical presence, and then it's just all over the place. The character is so inconsistent with what can he do? Is he really a ghost? I love the character to death, but it's also one of those things where I love the character so much, I try not to overthink the fact that the character is depicted as being all over the place.
One of those sort of things where you just want them to pick a lane, huh?
Pretty much. Just, I mean, because as a kid, I when I watched it, I didn't see the cool appeal of Jaga, because to me, I'm a child. I sympathize more with Lion-O because he was the young, muscular hero, the leader of the group. Whereas Jaga, I just saw was the old man, and he's a ghost. So I didn't want to see the old man, take on the villain from this episode that I thought was just such an incredibly badass character. But it bothered me that he was a ghost and he wasn't an actual being. And it just, as a kid, I bought it. I bought the fact that when he attacks Cat's lair and drains the Thundrillium from them, and then he kind of becomes a lot bigger, and then you see him attacking the Wallows village as this massive giant who's actually interacting with them and stuff, and none of it makes any sense really, but it was still just an awesome episode. And yeah, Thomas, you go ahead, because I feel like I'm going to just keep circling the drain here. Like, I love the character, but he's not given a real concrete, other than his backstory, of being a former ThunderCat, which was really cool.
All right, I'll go ahead and tag in for you. Don't worry. First of all, I do agree with your overall assessment. Grune is a very interesting character, especially considering the fact that he is the only, as far as we know, evil ThunderCat. You have, of course, other Thunderians later on that are pretty sketchy, especially in the second season, once I start repopulating New Thundera. But Grune is the only, to our knowledge within the cartoon, ThunderCat trader that just turned around one day and said, you know what? I'm going to wreck everything because I can, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And of course they do. But there are some interesting things that once we get into the actual episode Ghost Warrior, when we get down to it, that they did take some really special care when it comes to Grune as a ghost, at least in the initial moments when he's in the cat's lair, that I'll break down for you then, because it's actually really interesting. But in the show notes that Littered Star and others have written, they wanted Grune to be a very physically imposing character. The word they specifically used was martial, as in like martial arts. And because Grune's a warrior, he is, as far as we can tell, the only Thunderian that's ever depicted in actual legitimate armor. And he keeps it the entire time he's in the show. And I think he's in the show 3 or 4 specific episodes. One of them might be a little bit questionable as to whether or not it was actually him or not. But I find Grune to be a very interesting character, and I really wish they had done more with him, because there is so much that you could have done with him, but they just sort of let it go.
Yeah, he really comes off as a kind of like a marauder character, like someone who would attack villages just for the sake of chaos and destruction, and enjoy taking and putting fear into all, pretty much working as a loner for the most part. Like it's always interesting to see the villains having temporary alliances, which is why ThunderCats Ho was so great to see so many people aligning themselves with Mom Ra throughout the entire 5-episode story arc.
Mm-hmm.
Even Grune. But it is just, when I first saw ThunderCats Ho, I just felt like I think this is just a big toy commercial, but I love it because they're making sure that every prominent action figure, new and old, is being featured, other than Mongor, is being featured in some form or fashion in this. And I remember before I finished, I was like, God, I wonder if they can actually fit Grune in here before this thing wraps up. I swear to God, heading into that the 5th episode, and the kind of cliffhanger notes saying, hey, tune in for the next episode. I'm like, holy shit, man. Grune is actually going to show up in this episode. They have managed to get all the heavy hitters. I couldn't believe it. And again, he's fighting Jaga again. It's just kind of like to, make sure, hey, don't forget, you can buy Grune too, which I'm like, I think that's cool. I don't find that to be a degrading thing, because it was just so cool to see, everyone from the Berserkers to all the mutants to Captain Shiner. It was a shame Captain Cracker didn't show up in some form or fashion, but I almost feel like Grune's other appearances were a lot not as memorable as they were on the Ghost Warrior. As confusing and convoluted as his appearance was in that, it wasn't as memorable. Like Return to Thundera Part 2, you almost kind of feel like we haven't used this character in a long time. Let's use him.
And that's an interesting segue that I was going to bring up. It's really interesting that they establish in that Mum-Ra and Grune know each other.
Yeah.
When he pops up, his question isn't, who are you? It's like, oh, Mum-Ra, what do you want? So a little bit of fan theory here is, if they wanted to connect it a little bit better back in the day, it would have been really easy to explain the entire way Mum-Ra knows about the ThunderCats. He knows about the Sword of Omens is because Grune was, down there causing mischief on Third Earth that he got banished.
Yeah, which that leads to a pretty interesting idea. And you would like to think that, especially with the way they present Grune, is that he was on Third Earth. I mean, for what appeared to be a very long time ago, before the events of the Ghost Warrior. So obviously he has to be on Third Earth when Mum-Ra is obviously around. Maybe even when the Lunatics are running around on Third Earth. It's hard to say what kind of world it was, when Grune was running around on Third Earth. I mean, obviously there wasn't. What kind of makes you wonder too, like who entrapped him on Third Earth? Like if he was running around destroying and plundering people, like the Balkans, they knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
So who encased him in that tomb?
A lot of good questions
with the Mum-Ra. Like just like he did the Lunatics.
Well, That's a possibility. Main reason why Mumrine trapped the Lunatics is because they were threatening his rule, but Grune doesn't seem to be one that's really concerned with ruling Third Earth as he is just causing destruction. So were I to venture a guess, maybe the locals finally just got lucky one good time like they did with Mongor and found a way to trap him.
Yeah. And that's a great kind of plot point of trapping him in this tomb, but it's his ghost that's trapped. Like, are you under the impression that he was killed, and much like Freddy Krueger, they took his remains and hid them away in this tomb and put this pentangle, to ward off evil, to kind of keep his spirit, at base with his what appeared to be his original broken weapons on top of the slab that's covering it with the blue flame torches. And I mean, there's so many small elements that may have just been done for a cool visual, but you could almost kind of put all those together as like the torches are lit blue for a reason. That his weapons are on top of that slab, and they're all look like they're burned, like they're just beaten and battered, and it just so many small details. And that's what makes ThunderCats just such a great cartoon in general. Is all these attention to detail that kind of, it's like watching Alien or The Thing, and you look at all these fine details. You're like, I wonder what that is back there. Does that have anything? I mean, it's all these fine details. You start learning.
Clearly, a lot of thought put into just about every single frame of that episode. It was really interesting.
Yeah, and it's that's I think that was one of the more intriguing parts of the episode, is that opening 5 minutes of the Balkans finding that tree. It's split open from the storm, and it reveals this tomb, that's down in the ground. It's the most random spot. Like, it looks like, if you saw this in the daytime, it's like in the middle of a big open field.
Yeah.
And just tree is planted on top of it. So it's not so obvious that, hey, the remains of this marauder are buried underneath this tree here. Like, it looks like it could just be a tree you would see in an open valley somewhere.
Yeah, juxtapose that to Mongor. Mongor was in some ancient temples. There was a lot of fluff given to where he was sealed away because they wanted to cut away. Grune, it looked like they shoved him in a hole, sealed it up, and prayed that no one would ever find it.
Which it wouldn't have mattered, because even if the Balkans had not just happened to be there,
somebody would have
with that tree being destroyed. Someone would have wandered around down into that tomb and just snooped around, just because you're like, what is this place? And just inadvertently,
But I find Grune to be really fascinating. I really wish they would have taken more time to do more with him. But cartoons back then, they were a mile a second. They were pumping out episodes as quickly as they could because they had to meet syndication. So I don't fault them for it, but I just wish they could have done more.
Yeah, I don't either, and I can't sit there and say that they did a horrible job with the full execution of the character, because even though it's all over the place, and his appearances in ThunderCats Ho Part 5 and Return to Thunder Part 2, they're not as memorable as Ghost Warrior, but it still leaves the character to be, which I thought would have been a great attempt in the reboot from 2010.
2011, yeah, but
2011, but
we're going to discuss that version at a different episode, because that we need to tear that one apart later.
Yeah, well, just saying that it was, he's a character that really, and I've often thought too, if they're going to continue with this ghost motif, that the Grune that we see, the Grune action figure, is the ghost of this, marauder, former Thundercat. And I always thought, like, it'd be awesome to team him up with Scareglow, like a ghostly alliance, that these two, evil spirits, just kind of teaming up to help each other out, and just kind of causing like this. I always had this image of He-Man and Lion-O on top of Castle Grayskull, and you got Grune and Scareglow and like these massive like busts of those two looking down upon Grayskull, like kind of as like this unholy alliance, so to speak, with these two evil spirits. Even the Scareglow, yeah, just simply because Scareglow is the ghost of Skeletor, even though he's kind of like a ghost warrior, so to speak. No pun intended. It just kind of seemed like it's a natural fit to team those two up.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the last team up we got for those two brands were terrible. So I don't put much faith in anything like that going on forward unless.
No, I
What
don't
about?
either. But I still would love to see something like that come to fruition. I mean, it's even though that was a poor rape victim, you know, I still feel like there's still magic that could be done with that. And Grune is a character that I feel like has a lot of potential. I mean, a lot of the characters do.
Absolutely.
But I like to see a lot. I like to see some of the mystery kept. Like I don't like a whole. I honestly I don't know if someone were to do which they've done a Grune backstory in the Wildstorm comics. It was just small snippets,
Yeah, we'll
but
be
to
covering that
elaborate,
today.
yeah, small snippets and stuff. But I almost would want to keep some of it in a mystery, not over explain so much. But he's a character that I would love to see his time on Third Earth before he was in prison. I'd like to see, just elaborate more on his betrayal to Jaga. And I mean, that whole
Absolutely.
everything. I just, you know, I'm rambling too much. The character's got too much damn potential.
Absolutely. But we're going to go ahead now since we've pretty much dissect Grune pretty down to it. One thing I will say before we move on is I've tried figuring out what type of armor he's wearing. It seems like almost like early Grecian armor, but I'll let you guys know when I finally figured it out. But then
I just thought that was so cool looking too. That's
oh yeah,
and I will say that the cartoon design, definitely dwarfs the action figure.
oh absolutely.
Yeah, the shoulder armor of like the skulls on his shoulders and just the color motif. I mean everything. I love the action figure, but man, nothing compares to that cartoon design.
No, it
Jesus.
was a great design. Like he's immediately recognizable, and that's the thing about Grune that's really neat. Is although he wasn't in many episodes, doggone it, you remember who Grune is.
Yeah, it's a shame too because you almost really felt like if he was meant to be such a memorable and imposing character, why wasn't he? And I guess it's because they decided to write him as a ghost.
Pretty
Kind
much.
of, yeah. You can't really use him much, which I just thought like it's a great way of writing the character, but it leaves you with no returning opportunities for the character. You can have him, in one episode, deciding to temporarily ally himself with Rotaro and the mutants in one episode, or running around on his own trying to, I don't know, trying to think of like a particular art. I mean, I don't know, kidnapping.
Take over the Berserkers for one episode.
Yeah. May decides to usurp the Berserkers and take out Hammerhead. Now he's running the Berserkers, or something like that.
Yeah, that might actually make them somewhat competent.
I still like the Berserkers. I mean, but I think that because the Berserkers are just kind of a bunch of paunchy. You almost picture that they're stinky, don't bathe.
They're Vikings, of course they don't.
Well, they're Viking pirates. I just but I still find them to be extremely threatening and imposing. Especially in the episode Together We Stand, where it was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Where they're actually taking out the ThunderCats. It's like this is cool to see them be portrayed like that. Yeah, good stuff, man.
But we're going to go ahead and segue now onto the episode Berbils. Since we covered Unholy Alliance, I believe, last episode, we're going to go ahead and cover Berbils now, which is the third episode of ThunderCats. Tyler, do you have any initial thoughts you'd like to share about this episode?
I love this episode. I like it a lot. And I never saw it as a kid. It wasn't on VHS, and I didn't come across it in syndication on TV. I knew of the Berbils. Didn't see them a whole lot in some of the episodes, but when I did see it, unfortunately it had to be on DVD when the DVD releases came out. I really enjoyed it. Like I like the Berbils. I think they're not just the cute cuddly characters. I think they're an interesting concept. These robot bears that are just friendly characters, and they're not Ewoks, so to speak. I'm sure some people would say, hey, they're just copying Star Wars or something like that. But the way they're portrayed is these, they stand up for themselves. However, they don't want to hurt anybody. So that's why it's so interesting to see them attack the Trollocs with pissant weapons. And Lionel's like, why the hell are you using these things? They're not doing anything. And you're like, well, yeah, we know. We don't want to hurt anybody.
But we don't want to be cowards either.
Yeah, they're what's the right way to? I mean, they're flawed, but it's an interesting flaw, you know. And their whole setup of having to deal with the Trollocs, because the Trollocs are dealing with the Giantors, and it's I mean, it's a great episode. It's an episode that, you know, Mum-Ra's in it, but he doesn't do a whole lot overall. It's more about like setting up this other faction of heroes that the ThunderCats will be in contact with throughout the series. It's fleshing out Third Earth.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I think that separates ThunderCats from a lot of other 80s cartoons is they, at the very beginning, made a very solid point to do world building here. They were asking some very basic questions and had to get answers for it. So, all right, the ThunderCats are on a brand new planet. How are they going to eat? Well, we're going to introduce them to a group that's also an alien group, not from this planet.
Yeah.
They're going to befriend them. That's how we're going to get the cat's lair built. That's how we're going to do this. That's how we're going to do that. It wasn't very action-packed, but not every episode needs to. This episode was focusing on world building and establishing new character dynamics, and it did a very good job of that.
I will almost kind of say like the action is kind of reminiscent of Seven Samurai, you know, where the ThunderCats come to this small village because they're constantly being attacked, and it's not that it just kind of is reminiscent of the Seven Samurai Magnificent Seven kind of story.
Absolutely. Akira Kurosawa was a brilliant director.
Yeah, and that's what just made me think of is that, you know, even though the first battle with the Trollocs is with Lion-O, and then when they go back and tell the Giantors we got no food, then the Giantors come and bring in all the ThunderCats. It's just like, hey, here comes this great band of warriors that come in and defend this kind of helpless village. And it's cool to see them because the Berbils will obviously show up in the next episode, Slaves of Castle Plundar, as Thomas said, to kind of constantly keep building the world, establish that these characters are not just, you know, here to provide something like, hey, we you know, like as the cute and cuddly kind of characters outside of Snarf, is that to make them very intelligent, that they essentially help build the whole damn cat's lair. You know, and also establish that they are aware of the brute men. You know, so it's cool to think that these, you know, Berbils have been on this planet long enough that they're pretty well versed on what is, you know, what this planet consists of, or their immediate surroundings. They've been around the block. They've obviously been well established there to kind of know, you know, the dangers, you know, of Third Earth.
It gives the ThunderCats a better reference point than every single time they run into somebody being a brand new, oh, who are you episode, which would get tiresome on a new planet very quickly. So it was a really good idea from Leonard Starr and the writing staff to establish the Berbils. And while some people may make comparison to the Berbils and the Ewoks, as you established earlier, they're not really alike other than in physical stature, because the Ewoks are murderous teddy bear things that'll stab you. The Berbils are the friendliest things you'll ever meet. Although
they're not carnivorous.
Yeah, I am curious about one thing though. How do they eat?
See, I've often wondered about that too, because they're growing. It almost feel like they grow that food to help, you know, other species on the planet, because they clearly they're robots. And their mouths are like a blinking light. So,
you know, I thought that too, but at the very end of the episode, they joined the ThunderCats in eating.
True.
But
And I
actually eat. I think it's one of those situations of, man, we have thought through every single one of this. We've got the episode out. It is in storyboard phase. How do they eat? And some dude just starts tearing his hair out in the production staff.
Oh, I almost feel like maybe they don't eat, and they are simply there as a guest of honor. Like, you know, they're there. They can't eat, but they're participating in the festivities as a celebration of the Alliance, and not necessarily there to chow down on candy fruit. You know,
that is absolutely a possibility.
Yeah, I just try to look at it like that, because you look at them, they can't eat. I don't imagine they drink anything either, unless they're like robots and they need to, you know, be given some sort of kind of, you know, oil, you know, treatment or something like. I don't know, but I when you look at them, they clearly can't eat, and it just kind of makes you feel like, you know what, they grow all this food to. I mean, obviously, they're like for the Trollocs who come in and take the food, it's almost like you can almost set them up as like, well, we're growing all this food, so this invading species will leave us alone. It's like it's our payment to keep them from destroying our village. So we grow all this food and give it to them, so they'll leave us alone.
But at the same time, it's pretty clear there's some sort of techno-organic race. And the reason why I say that is because the entire reason they're on Third Earth is because they overpopulated their old planet. So clearly they breed somehow. So a lot of other questions completely in the opposite area of Grune's that have needed to be asked, but I don't know if we want the answer.
Yeah, I just, I'm happy if, seeing like little Berbils running around, like, you know what, I'm not going to question this kind of logic. I mean, how species in cartoons breed and reproduce, damn it, man, I am not interested in how they bump uglies and pop out, triplets of Berbils. I don't, that's a question I don't need to know the answer to, and I don't want someone to come up with the answer for it. So
what was it? A very prominent comic writer, Grant Morrison, went on a tangent once saying that adult nerds ruin everything because we tend to ask really odd questions and
true. That's a good point. And I try to avoid that with a lot of stuff. Like I don't mind having fun discussions with friends about certain stuff. Like I do it with my dad all the time whenever we watch Predator or Alien or The Thing, and Predator too. But we're not nitpicking or pulling stuff apart. We're looking at stuff and wonder how they, how do they manage to do this, and how long do you think it's been frozen under the ice, and just constantly building on these ideas with nothing concrete really to go with. It's not taking away from the mystique. It's like, I feel like if we were to come up with ideas of how the Berbils eat and reproduce, it might take away some of the mystique of these characters, because frankly, it serves no purpose to the story.
Nah, and that's what Grant Morrison was getting on about. It's like, whenever you present something like that to a child, like, hey, these Berbils exist because reasons, they're completely cool with it. But give it to an adult, and what we'll tend to do is we dissect it to the point. And Grant Morrison was saying they'll start asking, well, how does Superman fly? Who changes the Batmobile's tires? Nobody changes the Batmobile's tires. It's a comic book. It's media. Just sometimes don't dissect it. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to see, if Batman is driving the Batmobile and all of a sudden is like, oh my God, man, I've got to go to the bathroom really, really bad. I don't want to see what that looks like. Does Batman stop at a gas station? Does he go all the way back to Wayne Manor because he needs his home base to take a big shit?
Who knows?
Things we don't need to know. Yeah, things we don't need to know. It's fun to think about some of the stuff, from He-Man, ThunderCats, G.I. Joe, Turtles, and Brave Star, and Silverhawks. Or like a Silverhawks, like they all breathe in space. I'm like, you know what? I don't give a damn. They look cool. They're space cops. Like, I don't give a shit if they can't breathe in space. To see the mob, in their Corvettes flying around in space, while taking on the Mirage, while the Silverhawks eject, and they're flying around in space, talking and breathing in space. I don't care. It looks cool, and to stop and wait. We're going to try and bring logic from our planet to this cartoon.
Oh man, I got a great example there, and I hope she doesn't hate me for this, but I've got to pick on my fiance a little bit. We were watching.
Do it. Pick on her.
We were watching The Amazing World of Gumball at the hotel last week because I'm stationed here in McAllen for now, and this cartoon, it's really bizarre. Like, the kids that go to this school, like, could be anything. There's a potted plant, there's a literal banana, there's a cat, there's a fish, and she accepts all of this without question. But then she sees a Tyrannosaurus in the hallway, and she asks, why is there a T-Rex here? Look at her. I'm like, of all these things, you saw a literal potted plant walking around talking, but it's the T-Rex that throws your logic meter into the red. That's amazing.
Now some of that stuff can be done for humor. I'm like, and then you ask the question, why the hell is there a T-Rex running around? If you do it if you're thinking of it from a humorous perspective, but if you're looking at it from a logical perspective, like, dude, you're missing the point. That is the point. It's a T-Rex running around with a potted plant talking. It's
amazing.
It's like the Naked Gun. Some of this, it's no different than that. You don't question like how Priscilla Presley manages to slap Leslie Nielsen with a third hand. He's like, stops and wonders where the hell that third hand, and she apologizes for it. If we start to break it down, then it loses its punch.
As long as we don't call him Shirley, we're okay.
Exactly.
All right,
just
so we've had our fun.
If he wants to question that, she needs to go watch Naked Gun 2.5.
That was a good movie. But
right.
we've had our fun with Berbils. We're going to go ahead and take a short break, and then we're going to go ahead and tackle the comic before we close out.
Nothing I can do.
He kept babbling about masks and books.
No chance.
And a child. And what are the hills of Elshima?
No matter how bad things seem, you're not trapped until you stop trying.
The book says no. I never read that book.
The greatest power lies inside yourself, not in some outside source.
Toonami will return in a moment with the ThunderCats. The ThunderCats now continue on Cartoon Network.
And we're back, and we're going to go ahead and talk about the comic of the day, which is the ThunderCats Heroes and Villain. This is the second book from Wildstorm concerning the origins. Just got to double check, make sure I got that right. Yep, actually it's Villains and Heroes. The other one is Heroes and Villains. That was my bad. We're going to start with the first story here, and I'm going to go ahead and take the lead. Mr. Tyler here, we got, of course, on topic with the current discussion, is it opens, the first story is Grune right before his betrayal, and it starts with him and Jaga having at first it seems to be a serious bout where Grune wins, and you find out that they were just practicing. Grune and Jaga have a discussion about war, and Grune starts admitting to Jaga that he enjoyed war, he enjoyed the destruction, and he thinks that Thundera is, as he put it, neutered by the code of Thundera, and that they could be the greatest force in the universe and conquer all that they see. Jaga, of course, rebukes him, specifically with a slap to the face, and tells him he never wants to hear about it again. Grune turns around and immediately starts his rebellion against Thundera. And it's
which I like. I like that. I mean, for those listening, I haven't read this book in many years, but I enjoy this particular one here. Some of this is starting to come back to me, and I like that. It kind of plays, because I don't like how they over-explain villains and make them to be kind of good guys who were just kind of misunderstood. Mm-hmm. Like I want them to be pure evil, and that's what I see Grune. I don't want Grune to have a misunderstood motivation for why he does what he does. Like, right there, clearly saying that, we have this great power, we should not be holding back. And for Jaga to immediately act with such aggression to, just dismantle any kind of thought of abusing the code of Thundera. It really sets up just how different that these two obviously were great pals and fought many wars together, but it just shows you, really break it down, Jaga is the complete opposite of Grune. Even though he's using force, to cut down Grune to size, because of uttering such blasphemous thoughts, it just kind of sets Grune off on his path. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's got really solid dialogue. It's very well paced, and it gives Grune a little bit more backstory that we've all wanted. Granted, it's not full tilt, but it says, okay, why did Grune rebel? Well, Grune wanted power, and Grune thought that ThunderCats were the superior creatures. They had the superior firepower and strength to take the universe, and thought that was their right by nature. It's one of those might makes right mentalities, which is a decent motivation for a villain. It's, matter of fact, one of the only decent motivations for a villain. At no point is Grune shown as being, well, he's sympathetic. He's not Mr. Freeze from Batman the Animated Series. This dude specifically wants to wipe out everything if it stands in his way. Yeah,
and he sees himself as the alpha male, the survival of the fittest, and just... Yeah, it plays off the traditional villain of like being egotistical, that what you can do, you find yourself better than everybody else. We should be running the show. We shouldn't be, be these protectors and guardians. No, people should be worshiping me. And it's like I'm the best. I'm the strongest. I'm the most fearsome. Why do I gotta sit here and hold it back? And yeah, and that's it. God, I would have loved to have seen so much more of this battle that's hinted on in the Ghost Warrior, that Grune and his marauders just go on this long rampage that ends with a long battle with Jaga and Grune.
Oh yeah, that would have been very interesting to see more of. But let's go ahead and head on over to the next story, which is the origin of Ta-Shi, the wielder of the Doom Gaze. She showed up in one episode of ThunderCats, and they decided to give her some space here for her backstory. She was apparently part of what looks like a Mayan civilization based on the attire. And she was one of the handmaidens of the chief priest. There's a lot of implications. She was physically abused. She decided to pray to her gods for deliverance, and instead of her gods answering, the ancient spirits of evil did, and bestowed upon her the ability to control the minds of any man that she runs into. She, of course, being completely sensible, decides to just turn around and abuse people the way she was abused, which kind of leads to her being killed/banished to another dimension before being summoned by Mum-Ra. Tyler, do you have any thoughts on that?
Just it's a fun little kind of addition to this character that's obviously was not used a whole lot, but it adds a little extra flavor. It doesn't do anything to take away. It doesn't add too much. It just kind of adds an extra level of mystique to her. I think I don't feel like that was what was so good about a lot of these Thundercat kind of mini backstories that Wildstorm did. Is you didn't feel like that they took away a lot of the mystery of a lot of these characters, because not everybody is explained. They're just introduced and shown, and you just accept it. So I felt like the people behind these stories were treating all the characters, from the smaller ones to the much larger ones, with the same kind of dignity and treatment. That you're not doing anything to take away, but all they're doing is just, it's like Terminator 2 to Terminator 1, Predator 2 to Predator 1, adding to the mythology, but respecting with the highest honor what has come before.
I absolutely agree. The only thing I feel about this story, other than that, is out of all the other stories so far, personally, I believe this is probably the weakest, simply because it focused on a one-shot villain.
True, which I'm not trying to sit there and say that this is a groundbreaking story. It's not, but given that the nature of this particular character that was never used that much, it's fun, and it's not Grune, it's not Ratara or anything like that. But
one thing I will say is really interesting, though, is compared to all the other stories, this one's art style stands out above every other one, because ThunderCats in general is done in a very detail-heavy style, both from the cartoon to the original comics to the Wildstorm rumor. This one's done more in a Disney style, where there's a lot of smoother lines, a lot of softer tones, not much in the way of heavy superimposed detail on it. And it really makes the story stand out, especially it makes her seem separate from the majority of the storyline, because other than her one run-in, she has no direct connection or history with the ThunderCats at all. So I thought that was a really good choice in terms of art for this.
And maybe that's probably the reason why, because of the lack of use the character had in the series. That let's give a little, add a little extra spice to this character here. And it's
the name of the artists is Tom Bancroft and Tom Humber, so they did a fantastic job on that. So props to them if they ever hear this. So we're going to go ahead into the third story here, which is honestly is one of, if not the favorite story of these two for me, and that is the origin of the Sword of Omens itself. And it opens with a young Bengal tiger cub rushing through a busy street, bumping into another warrior from the ThunderCats, another part of the Tiger Clan, who teases him a bit and wants to know what he's doing, and basically giving him a hard time because his father is supposed to be making a sword for him, which is one of the things I really like about this. They actually paid attention to the original series that the Bengal Tiger clan were the blacksmiths of Thundera. So
Yeah.
you see the Bengal Tiger clan back during this time period having that position. So I'm glad there was very careful detail put into that instead of just, randomly throwing in the Puma clan or whatever. So then they segue over into the blacksmith shop after they sort of show the current at the time, Lord of the ThunderCats, wanting to go by and see the blacksmith. And he has in his hands the Sword of Omens without any Eye of Thundera in it. And he speaks about the properties of the sword that he's made. And basically he talks about how he's going to inlay silver in the hilt, and it's going to be the weapon of the Lord of the ThunderCats. And specifically because this Lord of the ThunderCats had an eye taken out, apparently in warfare, and this blacksmith wants to give the sword to him as a gift because he believes if he had this weapon during that siege, he would not have been wounded like that. The previous mentioned Tiger Warrior shows up, and I'm not delving into names too much because I want people to read it, so that's why I'm doing that. Gives the blacksmith grief about the fact that it's not his sword, and then the current Lord of the ThunderCats pops in, mentions that he wants a modification made, that he wants the Eye of Thundera, which we never get an origin for at all, just that it was found one day, put into the weapon to make it the most powerful weapon in the universe, because why wouldn't you do that? And of course, the entire story ends out with the current Lord of the ThunderCats holding the Sword of Omens aloft and crying out the battle cry of ThunderCats Ho. Tyler, you have any thoughts on this specific story?
Again, a fun little backstory that doesn't feel like it contradicts anything or, cuts down any kind of mystery. It doesn't really feel like it's too close to the events of what you see in ThunderCats. Like you could buy that this took place long time ago.
Oh yeah.
And just showing, like you said, showing attention to detail that these guys obviously, watched more than just like a small handful of episodes and thought they could put together stories based on just watching a few without having watched the vast majority, and paying attention to the fact that even though Bengali has a hammer, but when it's in Mom Ra Lives Part 2, I believe. Is it Part 2 or
either 2 or 3?
2 or 3 when he breaks the chains of the brute men with intense speed and tells Panther that he was a blacksmith on Thundera, which is a nice touch to say the Bengals, were blacksmiths. Like that was their craft. That particular species of Thunderians were blacksmiths. That I'm sure most of the males were raised to be blacksmith, passing down from generation to generation. Just a nice attention to detail. It just showed they cared. I like that a lot. And plus the fact that Bengali, puts the Sword of Omens back together after Tugmug breaks it.
Yep. With
his blacksmith skills, which that again too goes right back to the blacksmiths being able. Well, I mean, man, I'm getting tongue-tied here. I'm getting all excited here.
All right.
Which makes sense that Bengali could put the sword back together because of his skills. Well, it makes sense that his race is the ones that created the Sword of Omens. So obviously, this task, it makes sense why this particular character could do that. So
really?
It just adds more logic to that episode.
And more to that. The interesting thing about you bringing up logic is Bengali is clearly a Bengal tiger, right?
Yeah.
Bengal tigers are the biggest cat on planet Earth currently, right? Blacksmiths are not small people. So I liked how they use the biggest cat for one of the strongest jobs, just wailing that hammer over and over again every day. You cannot be a weakling and be a blacksmith. And that was a little, it may have been accidental, but it's a little bit of detail I really like that was put into that.
Because really, Panther looks more like a blacksmith.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic of discussion. We'll go on further because I'm actually at some point going to be doing a video on what specific type of cats the ThunderCats are based on. And Panther is going to be interesting. So I think you're going to like that when I get to that. But we're going to go ahead and segue into the final story into this. And this story is about the final days of Thundera before it blew up. And it opens with scientists have found readings that there's something wrong here. And the council is convened. And they argue and argue and argue and argue. Because they're all politicians, right? And at some point, you see it in the comic where Jaga just looks like he's had enough. And he tells them all, shut it. We're evacuating. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is a decree by the Lord of the ThunderCats. We're going to have to get this done. And I like that it shows that they did the best they could for what time they had, because they thought they had longer to evacuate the planet. It wasn't like Superman's origin where nobody believed Jor-El that the planet was breaking up. They knew it.
Yeah.
They just didn't know how much time they had. So I really enjoyed the writing for it. I like how it characterized Jaga. I like how it characterized Claudius. I like how it showed their friendship and how solemn they were about all of it. I like how it also gives us a little bit of a peek into the different Thunderian tribes and how they live and how they operate. And I like how they represent different characters. Like, although they're clearly not from Earth, you can tell, oh, this character is supposed to be depicting somebody from South Africa, or this person's supposed to be depicting somebody from Europe or from Asia. It's really interesting how they did this. It was just really, really well done.
So that's where I need to go back and look at this, because I vaguely remember. I remember the storyline, but all these details you're telling me, I cannot remember.
It's all right.
And I really have got to go back and relook at that.
You need to, because it is really neat. I like whenever we get a peek on what Thundera was like, because unfortunately in the show we only saw scraps and bits and pieces, usually a desert with some really weird spires in the background. We never really got to see what daily life on Thundera was like. That's why I like the last two stories so much, is because they both give us a peek into what that was like.
Honestly, it was never a big mystery to me, because I mean I was always more focused about the Third Earth stuff. I mean, because I mean, it's obviously it's a story I wouldn't mind hear more of, like which is the reboot screwed the pooch on, but it's kind of one of those things where it's like Superman and Krypton. It was never really that interesting to me in the sense that I didn't have to know what life was like on Krypton, much like I don't have to know what life was like on Thundera. However, I am open to learning more about that, because I was just like, I was so content with the current roster of characters that I just didn't really feel like I absolutely had to know. See, I was more interested in hearing about the events of Grune and Jaga being ThunderCats and Grune's mutiny and turning on. I'm more interested in that time on Thundera, and not necessarily the lifestyle of how people were on Thundera. With the
I can understand that. The way I look at it is kind of like when you get a shake. It's awesome when you get the shake, but having a little like cherry on top is kind of neat too. That's the way I see depicting everyday life at Thundera. It's not
and that's why I'm like the cherry. Like, I never eat the cherry. However, it looks good visually when you're given a sundae or a shake or something like that. It's an extra detail that you appreciate. Don't necessarily need it, but I'm also not going to reject it when it's given to me.
Exactly, because if I had to choose between the cherry and the shake, I'm going with the shake, right? So
yeah,
the shake is the substance. The cherry is a nice little garnish on top that makes everything look nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely fine with learning more about Thundera. I'm just saying it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't have to know it, because I feel like there's so much stuff that could be given so much more attention and fleshing out that that could be something to be done. But there's so many other characters and ideas I would love to see fleshed out more, like the Lunatics run, more about the mutants and Ritaro's alliance with the mutants. How long has that been going on? The berserkers running around. I mean, the villains themselves. I mean, I feel like they deserve.
Oh, absolutely. But personally, I would rate the book about an 8 out of 10. And I think that the last two we've reviewed, as far as heroes and villains to heroes, honestly, some of the strongest, if not the strongest, books we've gotten out of Wildstorm. While I did like the return, but I do have my reservations about it. I think these were really solid and really well done based on everything that they had going on at the time.
Oh, I agree. I mean, when I got both of them, me and my brother we both loved both of those issues, and for the most part, we loved pretty much everything that was put out at that time. All the little one shots that they did before the return started. Wasn't fond of Dogs of War, but
I hated the Superman crossover. It was terrible.
Oh, that sucked too. That was god awful.
Well, we'll tear into that one later, but we're going to go ahead and get ready to close out here. But I wanted to pass something by you since we're still doing character discussions. Of course, next episode, I believe it's the Slaves of Castle Plundar for episode discussion. The comic, what comic do you want to cover?
Maybe one of those. Gosh, I'd have to either have to look it up online because I know I've got all these boxed up somewhere. But I'd say any of the Wildstorm one shots, or hell, even the Return, first issue of the Return. Not Dogs of War. God, man, I don't want to do anything to do with that.
What do you think of their Battle of the Planets crossover?
It was fine, but I was not a fan of Battle of the Planets. It was just kind of like, Reddit was fine. My brother was much more of a bigger fan of Battle of the Planets than I was. I wasn't a fan at all. I didn't mind it, but
all right. How about we start with Wildstorm 0 for ThunderCats next time?
That's the one that has like the real kind of it's like a painting of like Lion-O and the rest of the ThunderCats on the cover, correct?
Actually, it's the one with Scott Campbell. He has really curly looking artwork on it.
Okay, all right. Now I remember. Yeah, because we got the 0 issue. I remember we had that. Yeah.
You want to start with that one next week or next time?
Sure. We can start with that one, or that should be online to read too, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course, I have you linked to the iCloud account where I have all this stored. If you need the password and everything to that again, that's fine. That's where I've been pulling my information from. I have them all in physical copy, but digital works so much better for what I do.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to try that out because I need to go back and read.
Yeah, that way you don't have to dig through your closet like I have before.
Well, because most of my the majority of my comics, including the ThunderCat comics, are all boxed up at my mom's house in the attic somewhere. And,
oh boy, so yeah, let's avoid.
I've already brought back too much stuff for the He-Man podcast as well. That I've got too many comic books here that I'm like, God, I don't have room for these. I can't keep bringing more back because I'll get lazy and never take it back to mom's and put it back in the attic.
My good man, we need to introduce you to digital media on these things.
I know, and I've dabbled in some of it, like the Marvel Unlimited service and stuff like that too. So I do appreciate it and like it and like to use it. So
it's all right. I'll get you connected later for it. But there's a character I want to discuss next time. I don't want to run it by you. It's a character I've been scripting a video for because I believe this character. Of course, we've been doing, hero villain, and we're going to keep doing that. But this is a character I feel that is not treated with the respect he deserves. As a character, I believe that a lot of people dislike for terrible reasons that make no sense. So I was wanting to pass by you what you would think about next episode. We discuss Snarf.
I like Snarf. I defend Snarf like I defend Orko.
That's why I thought you'd like that.
Yeah, no, I think people who don't like Snarf can go to hell.
That's a little strong, but I understand the sentiment.
Well, I mean, it's not justifiable. It's like one of those like cliche statements. It's like, oh yeah, I remember Snarf. Yeah, he was really annoying. Well, when's the last time you watched the cartoon? Probably like 30 years ago. Just going by what the consensus is on social media and YouTube and jerk off bloggers and stuff like that who think they got a cool opinion and they know about this stuff. I'm like, I could see why more people would be bothered by Snarf. Orko, I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get why people don't like that character.
Orko barely even shows up half the time. I don't get that either. But that's a conversation for a different story. But
yeah, but no, I'm cool with discussing Snarf.
Awesome. Then we have that set up. Let's see, for episode recommendations. Let's see here. What should we recommend the good people to listen to this today, Tyler?
I would probably have to go with because I know I was trying to remember which ones I'd recommended previously. Feliner Part 2.
Let's go with a double. Let's go with Feliner 1 and 2.
One, yeah, why not? One. I said 2 particularly simply because
of Snarf.
Well, I mean, not just because of Snarf, but it's Rotaro. It's Rotaro's first appearance, and you get to see a brief sword fight with him and Lion-O, and you see just how dominant Rotaro is when working with the mutants. So I just I love that character so much. So yeah, Fiendliner Part 1 and 2. It ties it into Snarf and gives you a great introduction to Rotaro.
Well, on that vein, I'm going to recommend Snarf Takes Up the Challenge.
Oh yeah, that one too.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and start closing out. Mr. Tyler, you have any closing thoughts?
This was a fun episode. I'm glad to be back at it here, dealing with the Thundercat mythology, and just looking to the future for further future episodes. And hope everybody enjoys this and piques their interest to go and dig up, their DVDs or their comic books, or go on eBay and searching for old VHS tapes and things like that. So all we want to do is just pique your interest. So if we did that, then it's worth every minute.
And of course, if you're more interested in action figures, check your local Walgreens, Walmart, and Hot Topic. You have a bunch of Loyal Subject ThunderCat figures that just hit market this month.
Absolutely. Check them out.
So we're going to go ahead and let you guys go. Hope you take it easy. Hope we see you next time. You guys have a good time.
Later.